Okay, hi guys. Today I want to go through a few of your comments and just add my own thoughts and answer those in the same move. So we're going to start with a few of these concepts. Baphomet, time, age, perception, which is also once again tied to your DNA. Spiritual deceptions. I received quite a few comments on certain type of people and entity attacks. So we're just going to go through the comments that I received. And there was a really interesting one. So I'm going to start off with the one I got on my last video, and I'll link it here too. It was basically about DNA and how precious it is and how they're always trying to get to our DNA. And a person commented, and I found this so interesting. They were saying how when I was a kid, my dad worked for a company that gave free ancestry DNA kits, and he made me take one thinking it's just some cool and fun thing to do. Now I'm having nightly attacks by invisible hands cutting me open and doing surgery on me or putting implants in my body. And whenever I sleep, I physically feel like a small animal walks in circles around me and has claimed to go by the name of Baphomet. I'm just trying to dug it out, and I'm fine going on like this as long as it doesn't get worse or my soul gets destroyed in the process. What do I do? Yeah, I found this one really interesting. And this is already like the second time I'm trying to record this video. So I hope I can recreate the thoughts that I already had. And the first time I was trying to record it, it was like a few minutes long already. But basically, what this reminded me of, so first and foremost, they're doing astral surgery on him. And this is really a huge reminder. So the DNA tests are not just about data mining. There was this huge release where it came to light that the DNA tests are mining your data and mining a whole bunch of info and then selling them to third and fourth type of companies and all of that. That is one aspect for sure. But what I commented is that is next level vicious. So they probably created astral clones from your DNA info, and they are doing a lot of these astral surgeries and other things. Thanks for confirming once again how precious our DNA is and how it's all connected to their agendas of getting to our DNA to create their AI replicas. And this is AI replicas in other realities. So it's not necessarily that you're going to see your AI replica walking around in your own neighborhood, although it could very well be like a replica that's walking around somewhere. Let's just say you're in the US and it's walking around somewhere in India or some other country. It could all very well be, but it seems more that these replicas are going to be in different realities. They're using them to do a whole bunch of their astral wars, similar like a voodoo doll. When they're puncturing a voodoo doll, that's not really you who they're puncturing, but it's your energy that's being affected by it if it's done right. Obviously it doesn't always work when random kids do it or teenagers do it, but it's similar to that. So it's in these different realities where they're trying to get to you. They're doing a whole bunch of these astral surgeries, or they're just doing a whole bunch of experiments on you. And what it means is if you're picking up on that, so if you're picking up on that somehow through dreams, as this person is saying, or you're picking up on that, let's just say even in your awake and aware states, because you don't feel fully grounded in your body, and that's how a lot of people pick up on these things, it probably means that a few of your soul essences, soul pieces are scattered in these clone bodies. So it's obviously all in your DNA. It's all somehow encoded in your DNA. And we can do a lot of work with that, but you just have to be aware that this even occurs. And so the number one prerogative is to make sure that your DNA starts healing energetically, but also physically. And there's a lot of ways you can do that, the physical way and energetic way. And even before I did my DNA course, which I already discussed in previous videos, so it's not just about, oh, it's just this one-off thing that you can do. Even before I dove really deep into the material that I present in this course, it was already pretty clear how important our DNA is. It's just mind-blowing. Like every day, I feel I learned something new about our DNA. Right now I'm really digging through it, how it's so connected to our ancestry, and also to the land that we're native to. And that's a big one, because for a lot of, especially US Americans, but possibly also Australians and South Africans and people who aren't necessarily, this is more in terms of Caucasian people who aren't necessarily in their native lands of Europe, you might feel a disconnect to, let's say you're Italian or you're Spanish or something, you know, you may feel disconnect to your ancestry from where they natively came from, but it's still tied in your DNA. But I want to discuss that in a future video because there's so much that goes into that. And that is like mind-blowing in and of itself too. Now, just for people who don't know what Baphomet looks like, we're gonna, whoops, hold on. Okay, we're gonna go through, I had like two screens open here. So this is Baphomet. We're gonna go through a mainstream definition of Baphomet. So the way you pronounce that is, depends on where you're from, but I guess you can pronounce it Baphomet or Baphomet. And Baphomet is really interesting because it's a newer creature, and what I intuitively get on it without having read on it extensively. And I do think I'm going to read on him and a few others again. I might read on the Satans, the devil, and Lucifer again, although I don't necessarily want to, but people are still asking about Lucifer constantly. And for some reason, it seems to be really pushed. I don't know if it's pushed in the truther, in the mistruther community, or in the New Age community again, as someone who's a good person. But Lucifer is not, from what I'm getting, no, he's not necessarily a good person, even though people want him to be because he's like the light bearer or whatever. Like Satan, devil, Lucifer, they're all in the same boat, although they are different entities. So they're not necessarily the same entity as other people say, but they are more like on the bad side, let's put it that way. And I had a video on those from exactly a year ago, actually, exactly in January a year ago. So you can view that until then, until I get more insight on those. But Baphomet is supposedly, if you go into a mainstream definition, an invented pagan or Gnostic idol or deity that the Templars were accused of worshiping, and that was later embraced by various occult and mystical writers. And the way that they got it is supposedly was the first known mention of Baphomet was in a letter written in 1098. So yeah, about 1000 years ago. In 1098 by Ribemont, describing the siege of Antioch. Antioch, there is an Antioch in California, so they're trying to replicate all of these here in the newer world. But Antioch is something that's, you know, obviously not here in the US, it's something in the old world. During the First Crusade, and Ribemont or Anselm stated that the Turks called loudly upon Baphomet, but scholars believe the name is an alteration of Mahomet or Mohammed, the founder of Islam. Islam seems to be coming up a lot lately for people. You know, people are like really raging against Islam and this and that, and without knowing much about Islam and the different nuances of Islam. So I just want to emphasize over and over again, it's not the religion that makes a person evil, because you find evil in every single religion. And Christianity has produced way more evil than any other religion out there so far, at least from what I've gotten on it. It could very well be that there's some Indian religion that has produced more evil. I'm not really sure, but Christianity has done a lot of evil, and more evil than Islam ever could. But you do have the more extreme Islam countries, and one of them is Saudi Arabia, where it actually originated from. And another one is what's now called Iran, which used to be called Persia. Persia used to be a pretty liberal, open-minded area. I mean, country now, but it just used to be an area in the world. But of course, it's changed. So those are the two ones where you would find the most hate against women, and whether or not that comes from the religion or just from the cultural thing. But those are the two ones. But as I already discussed, I think it was a YouTube live or a different video before, Saudi Arabia and Iran does not respect women in the same way other countries do. And yes, that can be an issue, obviously. Is it tied to the religion there? We don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, if you go to other Muslim countries, that's not necessarily the case. If you've ever been to Morocco, if you've ever been to Tunisia, if you've ever been to Egypt, if you've ever been to whatever else is out there, you know, even Turkey, although Turkey's not always Muslim, it's kind of divided in different ones. So it's a bit iffy. You know, you can't just overgeneralize one religion. And I know a lot of people who are small-minded or who are just not informed are never going to see it that way, and that's perfectly fine. But for the people who actually have never been in touch with Islam, this has been my own personal experience. I've been to a lot of Muslim countries. I've been to, I've been to the Middle East, as you know, at this point. And I also have friends from all walks in life, from every single religion out there. So you can't just overgeneralize like that. So they're saying here Baphomet came from Muhammad, which was, around that time. He lived from like 500 to 600 or so, something like that. I'm not really sure. It could very well be. What I'm getting is that this one is also the Freemasons falsely worship Baphomet too. This goes on. Let's just go through this definition here. So that's how Baphomet was supposedly created. What I'm getting is it's not necessarily tied to this Templar thing, but it could have very well been a newly created AI entity that looks this way, as you see in this picture right here. And it does seem to be a newer one, not necessarily one of those older ones. So newer meaning around that time, like less than 2,000 years old or less than like a few thousand years old. Whatever it is, this is what I'm saying. AI keeps procreating and creating new things like new things of evil over and over again. And AI is basically that. You can use AI for neutral as well. I don't think you can really use AI for positive. I do have to say that. But AI can be neutral or it's going to be negative. And so this is a form of this negative AI, the AI astral entity that keeps being created by AI over and over again. So Baphomet is one of those newer AI ones, and newer meaning, sure, it's already like 1,000 years or older at this point, but it's still relatively new, at least compared to the other AI. So Lucifer, Satan, the devil would be older AI, and there's much older AI than that too. The angels are pretty old AI, and so are the archangels. So this is Baphomet, and that's what I had to say in regards to that particular comment. Okay, let's navigate to the next one. I feel they're all related. So this was interesting, though, that they were using the DNA to poke him in the astral. And the reason he probably picked up on it in the sleep was because that's when you would really feel that, when you're not necessarily highly tuned into that, when you don't do energy work on a daily basis, such as other, like I would probably pick up on that more in the aware sleep. But when you don't do that, you would pick up on this when you're asleep, most likely. So this is just another huge confirmation that whatever you're dreaming, yes, it can absolutely be a psychic attack too, but not always. A lot of times we are picking up on a lot of things that are done to us in astral realms and parallel realms. And also we're getting a lot of intuitive insight through our dreams. I know I for sure am, because I have an astrology term, a finger of God, in mind. So for me, dreams are always going to be something where I get a lot of psychic insight through, but others may too. And then here's another one. A person commented on a different video saying birthday cakes and blowing out candles is an aging ritual. So whenever I get these type of comments, yes, it's true. To a certain degree, absolutely, it's true. What did I reply to this one? Okay, so what I replied is another person was like, oh, I always suspected this. Does it make you older? No, it doesn't necessarily work that way. What I said is age in and of itself is tied to your DNA. Once again, your DNA is tied to the time and the clock that the controllers like to use to mess with us. Your skin actually regenerates every 3 months. And this is a scientifically proven fact. For those people who are like, oh, you lose is it collagen or elasticity of your skin when you get older? It's not that simple. Sure, when you're 90 years old, perhaps, but actually for a majority of your life, your skin has that perfect ability to regenerate every 3 months. Why doesn't it do that? Because we're completely programmed to age after we hit a certain number, right? And we're like, okay, now we're just going to give up. It's just a general cycle that we're following. We have to get older. We have to develop more wrinkles and this and that. So sometimes, some people, when they're 50 years old or 60 years old, they look amazing compared to other people who are only 30 or 40. I look back at pictures when I was in my 20s. I think in most of those, I actually looked older than I do now, And so I'm like, oh, it's definitely an aging problem. It's also the area you grew up in. I grew up in Europe. I will never forget this one thing. When I started having American friends, people who were like studying in my student town in Germany, and they wanted to know how old I am. I told them my age, and they're like, oh my gosh, Europeans really do look older than Americans. It wasn't very flattering even back then, even when you were like a teenager or in your early 20s back then. But then once I moved to America, a lot of times you get the opposite effect where people always think you're younger than you are. And yes, it could be the way that you're acting. You know, you're not as overly mature as a lot of these super duper hyper mature Europeans. And I'm just going to put all Europeans in one pot in this particular instance. But I think it's also just the way people live life here. It's in a way more positive manner than in most of Europe, especially Eastern Europe, though, but also in Germany. Germans are pretty pessimistic. Not all of them, but a lot of generations in Germany are very pessimistic. It's just this attitude thing and also cultural conditioning. So I think there's a lot that goes into aging and everything. So it's your skin actually regenerates every 3 months, and so do a lot of other body parts. This is why some look older in their 20s and in their 30s and so on. Not sure about this aging ritual in particular, but just the fact that in a lot of cultures, it's being asked, how old are you instead of how young are you, already points to how they want to artificially age us more than necessary. In France, they say, how many years do you have? So they don't necessarily say how old or how young you are, but just how many years do you have, right? I'm convinced we are fully capable of living to at least 200 years in this lifetime. Some people have run their first marathon at age 84 these past few years. So if you've ever seen someone make headlines for running their first marathon at 80 or 90 years old, that is tied to how well you can regenerate your own body, your own muscles, your own, basically it's all tied to DNA over and over again. But basically with the birthday cake and blowing out candles, what I wanted to say also, I think the birthday is the only time you're blowing out candles. You don't do that during your wedding day. You don't do it during a funeral or anything. You really only do it during a birthday. Unless there's like a ritual or some sort of occasion I'm missing. If so, comment below. But also it's true, when you blow something out, you usually diminish the light. So for me, it's not even necessarily an aging ritual. It's just diminishing the light, like blowing out like a piece of a soul somehow in a form or another. It's a bit hard to explain in words. But energetically, that's just how I pick up on that. So I don't think blowing out cake. So if everyone's freaking out, if they ever blown out a cake on a candle during their birthday, I don't think that necessarily is going to reinforce you aging more. It's just more about being conscious about these things, being like, oh, this is why you're blowing out, you know, a light, a fire within those type of things. So I found that comment really interesting. Moving on to the next one. Time is an illusion. Definitely, I don't even feel like 2024 is a correct year. So this was in regards to, you know, saying, are we really in the year 2017 or 2024? 2024 is the correct year we are really living in. Something has been pushing me to go backwards in how we used to live our lives. I've been practicing and retraining myself to even start leaving my phone at home when I go out. I even feel drawn to using kerosene lamps as lighting. I have completely changed what I eat as well. Yeah, leaving phones at home regularly is a really good practice. First of all, you're being tracked 24/7 through your phone anyhow. And the EMF radiation is a lot, you know. And the kerosene lamps, haven't heard of that yet. Makes sense. So good point on the lighting. I know the LED lights for sure just cause more EMF damage too. So that's just another factor. You know, this is the thing, they get us with, oh, a lower utility bill. But you know, for me personally, I have switched out a few of my lights with LEDs, and that was a few years ago in this particular place. Meaning I have the comparison of my utility bill before, like my electricity bill before and after. And yes, the first year it was lower, but funnily enough, now that everything's gone up, it almost doesn't matter. You could argue, oh, it would just be even more if you hadn't switched them out, but they're still increasing all these prices, right? For almost no reason. Even if we are playing along and switching out this and that for it, they're still increasing it on us no matter what. So, you know, there's almost no winning here, right? There was another one that had to do with the 36 hours. So I had a video on a guy who was promoting 36 hours without eating, and he was part of the Illuminati because he was doing this entire eye symbol. I think I even mentioned in that one video where it's analyzing eye symbols that people were throwing up in their videos. And he was saying, get a calculator, go to 1, 2, 3, all the way to 36, then hit equal and see what number you get. Pretty obvious already, right? And what you get is 666. So 666. And I actually checked this too. And what did I write here? Yes, I checked it. How telling that this person who's storing up the I symbol when you go to 36 hours and just do it that way. But these are things you would have to know about, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily intuitively add those numbers up in a calculator. And so they probably, the calculated idea was mentioned in a different video. And he's also saying how my friend told her that her father got a pop-up on his computer from them inviting him to join. He was into some dark stuff and had plenty of entity attachments, and they took notice. They have every resource available to them, from arcane to advanced tech beyond our wildest imagining. So it doesn't even matter where you live, because this guy was living on a pretty remote island somewhere. It doesn't even matter where you live. If they want to get to you, if they just want to pull you into their club for whatever reason, because they think you're going to be able to influence some people, or be able to be really easily influenced by them, and be able to be the pseudo influencer that a lot of people are nowadays. You know, if you go to all these accounts online that have like 200,000 or 1 million followers, a lot of those are bot followers anyhow. But those are the people where they're going to influence, they try to influence the masses with. And so this would be a perfect example of it. I'm sorry, the comments are a little bit chaotic, and I'm trying to read them here and still stitch them together. Okay, we're going to move on to Lisa Renee. A person saying about the video that I had on her. Thank you for this work. Her about section is full of lies, especially using wrong names of founder races and true higher beings and guardians. Don't resonate with that really, but it's a true psyop, and read her energy even through her videos immediately rings many alerts. Another person is saying, I am an heir of an ancient lineage, not to mention at this time, I practice Lisa Renee's and also Ashayana Dean's materials. They are 50 to 51% positive in general, but you are spot on. The crap they do to avoid people getting out of their agendas when trying to leave. I started in 2012, this crap. It is 2025. And not even now have I completely cleared the influences of their collectives, not the physical people. It's a much larger psyop than that, but who listens? You can't really even try to read with a clear mind the idea that Lisa Renee is wrong without having 10 to 11 implants activating and spirit guides or crap holes aligning timelines and shifting realities to distract you from even thinking logical about it. Been there, trying to escape the nets, been abducted by Guardian Alliance, and also by some other things, but that's not the topic of this conversation. Just wanted to say a cheers for your good idea to speak up. Congrats. I think he's not a native speaker from what I'm gathering, native English speaker. But yeah, I mean, this is exactly, every time I tap into her energy specifically, and I want to have another video on her actually, because I did a few sessions on people, and this, I don't know if it was featured in a group somehow that was following her, like some sort of WhatsApp or Facebook group, but all of a sudden I had all these requests of people who wanted the session and clear the stuff with her. And for each and every one, it was almost the exact same thing. They were cocooned into this huge new age cocoon thing created by her, completely warped in. It was very hard. It was so sticky and icky to get them out. But I do want to talk about this in a future video. Okay, here's another one on the new age. You have to find out what is triggering you so much here, was the advice from my new age friend after telling her that I was called a cuss word by a random individual on the street. That's the new age program. Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I personally also came across the what's triggering you quote a lot of times lately. Yeah, it's the what's triggering you post can be very harmful because it can actually evoke a lot of trauma that's in us already. And so it already puts us in this strange position of, oh, you know, when you already feel you're a bit more in a victim mentality because you experienced trauma, oh, what's triggering you, it's your own fault that they're calling you this, puts you even in more trauma than it should. And then there's another one in regards to the new age. If you mentioned to people, hold on, yes, shadow work. If you mention it to these people, they say to hang in there and it's part of the process and you're ascending, and to keep doing shadow work. But when you followed this sort of thing for years, you notice these spiritual community people have been doing shadow work for years and literally not getting anywhere. And it's probably why lots were typing that they are fed up and frustrated and disappointed, It's almost as if they've nearly hit rock bottom on their journey. My reply, yep, shadow work is mostly just another sham to keep people complacent and in a constant hurt pain cycle. It's good to be introspective, but at one point you just have to live your life and the consequences of it. Meaning, if you make a decision, an educated decision, and things don't work out the way you imagined, that is a fair consequence. You know, it's not always like, oh, I didn't do enough shadow work. This is just life. Okay, but we have to, in order to move on, we have to move on, right? Not constantly trying to heal things without getting anywhere. So this entire shadow thing really resonates with me. And I think it's probably also worth mentioning in yet another video. And I know I keep saying I want to make a million videos on these topics, but they're so elaborate. Because I personally was in touch with a person whose main work, she also does shamanic healing practices, whose main work was shadow work. And as much as I do think this person did have a lot to offer and this and that, they were also a lot in their so-called ego, meaning other opinions, especially my opinion on AI and my opinion on Lyme disease too, wasn't valid for this person because they were also mighty and also right. And they've been doing it for 30 plus years. They have a PhD in this, PhD in that. And how dare I come along and question them? So after having that interaction with this person, also other people in particular, I just started noticing that shadow work is this shield that they put out in front of them to not be hurt even more. But by consistently repeating over and over again how shadow work this, shadow work whatever, it actually opens up this huge hurt, pain portal and also cycle, and it keeps people stuck in a completely different loop. So it's not bad if you do shadow work occasionally, or if you're really drawn to it, you dive into that, you gain some introspection, you heal from it, you move on. But doing it constantly, can you just imagine doing it constantly for like decades and decades and still not really getting anywhere? Like I cannot. I'm just not that type of person, I guess. So for me, it's very hard to even imagine that, but some people do that. Another person was saying how her, I guess I can say daughter, but how her relatives was actually, she had a psychotic schizophrenic episode, and that was around the eclipse. So that was last April. And how she's convinced paranoid schizophrenia is an entity attachment. And I can confirm that. Like a lot of these mental illnesses are entities and entities attachments, especially schizophrenia, especially, I even want to say bipolar disease, although bipolar can have to do with brain chemistry and this and that too. But especially a lot of these that evoke these psychotic episodes, it's usually caused by an entity in their field. I'm just saying that from my own personal opinion. It's not a, yeah, I'm going to say I'm not a doctor, I'm not this and that. You get where I'm coming from. Just going to say that for the sake of this video. A short time before she walked out of her father's home, she was involved in some occult stuff and was forever trying to cleanse attachments. Some are very persistent. I want to point that out too. She told her brother something big was coming. She still doesn't acknowledge me or her father, her lifelong best friend, brothers, so on. But you know, after 2 months, she's now in a more stable position. So this kind of blew up around the eclipse, last year's eclipse, which was around April. And that was a really intense one. Like we had this fabricated earthquake here where I am in New York City, New Jersey, and it was already clear they were trying to usher something in. So the one that we had after that, which was more around September or October, one of those, I don't feel it wasn't that intense, but the one in April was really intense. We're going to have a new one too in a few months' time, by the way. So much to schizophrenia. Oh, another person, we're just going through all these new age things. Another person was saying, I spent 10 years in Bali, got deep into Ubud life. So you have Canggu or Kangu and Ubud. And then you have another one. I forgot what the third spot in Bali is where a lot of these crypto people go. Ubud on Acid blocked me. Ubud on Acid is this account on Instagram who posts a whole bunch of funny memes, but they're not very introspective either, and featured me as an attention seeker who's just about me, me, me. I'm ego hurt because I really appreciated what they started doing. The spiritual narcissism is amazing there, to a point where there's a pretentiousness about being one of those who sees through the spiritual BS. Be careful, honest seekers. The beautiful environment is a smokescreen for really power-hungry people. Don't get too serious. That's my advice. And my reply to that one was, and this is in regards to the video I had, how spiritual influences have ruined Bali. A lot of those accounts who expose others have a huge ego from my own experience. They pretend they have a sense of humor, but they don't really display that in real life. So I personally can talk about that 100%. You've seen it happen over these past few months again, but you also seen it happen throughout these past few years. Like none of them, you know, you kind of, it's like little sting into the bee's nest, and a whole bunch of hornets and wasps and bees just come out that you didn't even know exist, right? No reason to be hurt if you know your truth. And I believe what you say about Bali. You see this all over the world, also in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is another one that can be highly abusive in the spiritual community, at least, especially these retreat centers. Power hungry and capitalism under the disguise of pseudo spiritual retreats and other things. I know these two people. I'm not necessarily friends with them, more like acquaintances, but they posted a lot about this on their social media, and I'm following them on there. They actually came to a spiritual retreat center in Costa Rica, no idea which one. I think they were doing a lot with ayahuasca and Cambo in this retreat center in particular. And they ended up staying for 1 or 2 months, and they were supposed to stay for 6 months or longer. And after 1 or 2 months, they broke it off and they just went to different countries like Mexico, Guatemala, because the retreat center experience was so abusive. And what they said, the owners they dealt with were so abusive that they couldn't take it anymore. And that was in Costa Rica. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is happening in Bali, you know, in other parts of the world too. Like I know for sure it's happening in Peru, and, you know, where you have like the Sacred Valley, those areas too. So here's one on the soulless beings. The soulless beings can be identified as well by their lack of internal monologue and their inability to visualize. It's weird when I encounter them. This is only partially true. Yes, for sure you have those extreme background characters who are like this, but your son, your daughter, your relative, your neighbor, your coworker who you talk to every single day can also be soulless. It's not sure. I'm actually not sure the inner dialogue theory really applies for all of these soulless people, but most of those thoughts could be created by AI anyhow, and that's where the voices in our heads come from. So, you know, a lot of thoughts, like what's the percentage of thoughts? Like 70% of thoughts or so are not necessarily even our own. They're either through social conditioning, through random things that they're pumping into the atmosphere, and through other enforcements that we have around us. And that's why you can also reframe and you structure your thoughts in a pretty short time frame compared to other things. You know, it might not be as easy to lose the same amount of weight than actually restructuring the amount of thoughts in the same time frame. You know, you can probably restructure your thoughts in 30 days or so if you do it regularly, if you have an exercise every single morning. And what I also want to say, I do want to have a different video on this too, but when you first wake up, you're actually in the alpha brainwave state. Usually we tend to be in the beta brainwave state, just as a difference. The alpha brainwave state is what is used, you know, if you're daydreaming, if you're astral traveling, if you're meditating, that's the alpha brainwave state. When you first wake up and you wake up from your dreams, even if you don't remember them, you're in this. And this is exactly why it's so crucial to start doing these type of exercises, like the reframing your thoughts and minds in the first 30 minutes when you wake up, as opposed to, you can also do it during a different time frame in the day, as opposed to grabbing your cell phone and looking at your screen and scrolling through your screen for 30 minutes or an hour straight, or even 10 minutes straight. Because when you're in this very precious alpha brainwave state and you look at a screen, you lose a lot of things that you could I mean, you're being reprogrammed on a whole new level. And if you can get an alarm clock that's not tied to your phone, or turn your alarm clock off right away, put your phone back on airplane mode or whatever, and start doing like all these spiritual practices that you want to do in the morning, because that's when they're going to be the most effective, whenever you're in your alpha brainwave state. So another thing I wanted to mention. One person's asking, are these attacks caused by those who use Bluetooth devices connected to the nano that they've infected everyone with? Because I've noticed members of Satan's tribe waiting in cars or stalking people with their phones, and heard that using apps also connects us to the metaverse invented by Luciferians. I find that giving all my love, okay, it's like a religious thing, all my love to him and asking for peace before I fall asleep has helped me from having nightmares. I don't believe in that either, as you guys know. But yes, Bluetooth nano, it's all connected to the same digital realm, like the digital astral realm, where we're being bombarded with. Yes. And I had a video on that, how it reshapes your thoughts too. Wow, you guys, I thought at this point we would be way further in. Okay, we're gonna do a few more comments here. But this is like I only did a few comments and I thought we're already like 35 minutes in. That's crazy. I've listened to these people you mentioned, but I just wasn't buying it. My intuition was telling me it's wrong, but people like David Icke are saying they tell you parts of the truth, but go with your intuition, don't get sucked in. Yes. And another thing is, so this is in particular, with the soul trap community. Yes. And another thing, the energy of these people is really off too. It's surprising they still have followers. Energy does not lie, as we all know. And the person commented, yes, I noticed that. Thank you for the confirmation. And with a lot of people, energy just once they start really being used as a puppet for these type of topics and things, and they're not clearly in their own energy anymore, you can just tell. People's energies just changed over the course of a few weeks, a few months, those type of things. Obviously, energy can change for different reasons. When you're under a very strong psychic attack, it can also change very much, which I'll talk about in yet another video in the future. But with this in particular, when the energy is just so off all of a sudden and people just notice, you just notice energetically, and I feel that's also why people are picking up on this. It's not just what they're talking about that doesn't resonate. It's just there's something completely wrong with this energy. So Ike is another huge example of this, but also the smaller ones. From someone who has worked in the physical therapy field for 37 years, I have witnessed personally just how corrosive our society is on breaking down an individual's physical ability through the work until you die model. I am in complete agreement with you to start sooner than later. I told my wife for years that if we wanted to travel, we need not wait. I posted this one short where I was actually in Hawaii being like, transcending program starts with the one society throws at us, and how traveling when you're younger is actually more enjoyable than when you're older. I'm not saying you can't travel when you're retired, when you're in your 60s. Obviously, if you're going to turn 90 years old, totally, you still have like 10, 20 something years of good travel ahead of you. But for me personally, and I don't think I even mentioned it in this really short video that I posted, I was somewhere in one of those national parks on Big Islands, and I just noticed how I was driving my own car, like I can rent my own car because I'm not like inhibited through sight or through anything. I know how to drive, obviously. And this other car pulled up, and there was this elderly couple in there. I don't know if they were like 65 or even 70. And they had to pay this guy $200 to drive them to that national park because they themselves didn't want to drive or weren't like fully confident about driving in a foreign country. I think they were even from Germany or France, or couldn't really tell with their accent. They weren't speaking their language. But they were like this couple in a foreign country, and they were basically dependent on someone else instead of, if they had been 30, 40 years younger, they would have been easily able to rent their own car, which would have been a fraction of the cost. They would have felt more confident in navigating a foreign country. And that kind of triggered that video. So there were a few videos that I posted when I was in Hawaii, but this was one of them where I was like, if you don't do it now, when you actually have the means, you can always stay somewhere for a relatively cheap rate. You don't always have to book like 5-star hotels. Like some people go camping all the time, if that's your thing. I don't personally do that, but there's always ways around staying in expensive places, no matter where you go. Even when you go to expensive places, there's always another option. So I feel a lot of people are just held up by all these wrong reasons. But the older you get, first of all, if people have kids, like when you have children, you travel with kids, it's going to get more expensive because you're more people. When you're older, you perhaps don't want to face these challenges. It's like you don't want to drive around late at night because your eyesight is not as good as it used to be, or you just don't feel as confident. So then you have to pay extra money for people that you rely on to drive you around, just those type of things. So that's just basically what triggered it. Okay, here was another comment. Do you know anything about soul theft through photography? The newest ploy is capturing and changing the biofields through flash, whether it be traffic cameras, general photography, and someone else seems to have covered this. I have not heard about this yet, but I do think parts of us are captured in a photo and made timeless or somehow eternal, which is why I personally think pictures can be a very powerful tool, not just for psychic insight. I get a lot of psychic insight through pictures, as you guys know, when I just look at a person's photo. But capturing through flash, it's worth reading on. I'm gonna keep this in mind as something to read on for later on, but I'm not sure about that, if the flash really captures a part of your soul. But there is something very comforting about us living on in these pictures, because if you go back to 200-300 years ago, where the technology had just started, it just started like in the 1800s is when it became more and more popular. This doesn't necessarily exist, now, but now obviously they can just create all these AI characters through our videos and pictures too. So there's always this extreme side to it. I mean, I think the trajectory is very clear where they want to take that side, that you're not going to even be able to differentiate if this is me talking or an AI thing talking. So one way is to know with the hands, if there's like all fingers on your hands or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of scary how it can go to either extreme. It's worth reading on in the future. Here's one. I'm going to end it with the Alchemist comments. I got like 3 comments, really interesting comments, because of the Alchemist. After watching her videos, my eyes and head just felt foggy and confused. So you are right in what you're saying about the hypnotic imagery. Thanks for making this video and bringing awareness to it. If you look at the logo that she plays in her videos, and I was attacked by other people too, in regards to the Alchemist, how dare you question this person, blah, blah, blah. All you have to do is look at her logo and slow-mo it, and you'll see all the crap that's in it. And that doesn't belong in someone who's not infiltrated and not compromised. You won't see that in my logo because I don't even have a logo, right? But if I had one, I wouldn't put all these hypnotic images in it. But part of the reason I actually don't have a logo is because of that. I don't want ever to have anyone. I mean, first of all, it takes way too much time for it to always upload and everything, but that is a huge danger. Even if you hire someone to do your logo, there could still be stuff in it. Another person saying her information is intriguing. At the same time, I feel like she can be an agent to dumb down my true intuitions of what I'm experiencing. Like she teaches me the layup to keep me from learning the 3-pointer. Good way to put it. And if it's not just in regards to her, which is Sarah Al-Khaladi or Al-Khadi. It's not even her real name, so it's hard to pronounce. But it's also in regards to all these other huge New Age channels, right? Like they never want you to get to the real truth. So there's always this barrier for you to access your own intuition, your own truth. And another person saying about the Alchemist, she made an Instagram post one day where she was standing in front of the sun, talking about showing her true form, but that they couldn't handle it, and then it was gone. Funny thing though, I saw a picture once depicting a Saturn inhabitant, and it looked like her. Saturn is the struggle, by the way. So basically, what I commented is basically she's a demon. That confirms it. That's what I got from that particular insight. Okay, so we're gonna leave it at this. Thanks so much for watching. We've had so many other things like some Indian deity comments and all of that. But yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that for today. Otherwise, it's getting too long. Thank you so much, and tune in for the next video. Until then.